So very good afternoon. So we are discussing unit number 4, which is disaster management in India. Okay, already we have seen about hazards, components of disaster relief, disaster management act and policy we have seen in last class. And one more very important question is, they will ask about what is the disaster management plan in India. So that we will see today. So let us discuss today plans of disaster management in India. Okay, so they are divided into short term and long term plan. Okay, then we will again I think we all seen about what is role of GIS and information technology component in preparedness and all we have seen. Then we will move on to what is the risk assessment or disaster risk assessment, how it is being calculated. Then various phases, response and recovery phases of disaster. This is same as what we seen in unit number 3. Only difference is now they are asked with respect to India. So again we follow the same nomenclature of what is been followed by UNESCO. So we will try to see what is that as a repeating class today, so that it will be useful. Then on the last topic of unit number 4 is disaster damage assessment. Okay, so this is what we are going to see. So we will look into 3 subtopics. So first subtopic will be what is the disaster management plan. Then we will see about risk assessment, and then we will see about disaster damage assessment. So when you see plan, disaster management plan, it is divided into 2. One is short term, another one is long term. So from the word itself, short term, disaster has occurred, and is there any special inputs required? See, special inputs is nothing but that is unique for that type of disaster. So in some disaster you might have not come across any such thing, and this time when it is occurred you require some additional, so that we call it as special inputs. Then facilitation, how we are going to do the overcome disaster. Then resource mobilization. So we all know that if a disaster has occurred, then you required food materials and all other essential requirements. So how we are going to mobilize. So only this 3 comes under short term, whereas when you look under long term, that is development initiatives, then monitoring, preparedness and prevention measures, then international assistance. Okay, so international assistance is nothing but with respect to fund and methodologies. Okay, so under short term plan, based and aimed for restoring normalcy in a short period. So short term plan is only during disaster. Okay, so disaster has occurred, so then how we are going to come out of it. Then amount of resource material required to be mobilized we will discuss. Then data on intensity and spread of various disaster in the area last 10 years, that is nothing but documentation. Preparing documentation also comes under short term plan. Then lesson to serve as an input for further planning and relief and rescue. Then it should be based on declared variability of the area, particular type of disaster. Then forecast and future disaster. Then corporate suggestions and capabilities from NGOs, non-profitable organizations. Then plan, prepare for setting up community groups to appropriate level. So from this it is very clear. So short term is nothing but one disaster is happening, so what and all you have to do. So at the time of disaster, what you are going to do will be declared in short term plan. Okay, this is an important 8-mark question. They will ask about disaster management plans, so you have to write about short term as well as long term. So long term is incorporate policy directives and preparedness as well as post disaster construction and rehabilitation. So how we are going to do your post disaster construction, how we are going to give the rehabilitation. Then establishment needs in an area, rehabilitation depends on considerable on damage assessment report. So when you want to do rehabilitation, you should have an assessment report. Then detailed survey of the community, what type of people and what type of their living. Then objective of achieving overall development, then satisfying basic needs, See, in rehabilitation I cannot build a guest house and give, so it is just a basic needs. Okay, so economic only it will be there, you cannot go for a premium like apartments and all building up. Okay, plan implemented successfully only through partnerships with NGOs and community participation. So unless otherwise the affected people cooperate, we cannot go for very fast recovery. So the main thing is community participation, that is required. Okay, so this you have to write as a separate 8-mark question. They will ask in disaster management what is short term and long term plans. Okay, they will not tell it as short term and long term, they will just say it as disaster management plan. Okay, then we let us move on to objectives of risk assessment. Why you want to do any assessment? Assessment is nothing but taking note or putting document. Okay, that is called, we usually call it as assessment. So what is meant by risk assessment? So before that you should know the objective. That is only objective is identifying the hazardous activity. So if you take Chennai, then risk assessment work, first work is they have to identify the hazards which may occur in that particular area. Then assessment of risk level and severity in different operation. The same disaster at all the places will not have same severity, the severity will vary, so that you have to, that is the main objective in risk assessment. Then identification of control measure, setting of monitoring process. Monitoring process, I think we have seen a lot. Inside your seawater we try to keep sensors and try to measure the movement under the sea, and like all that setting up, even like putting up from the information from geostationary satellites, try to get the satellite information and try to process it. Reduce the impact of misscape of all kinds, reduce inherent potential for major accidents. So methodology in risk assessment. Is shown as a flowchart way. So first is collection of information and identification of hazard, then classify. Once you get the information, you will have raw data. So raw data you have to classify. So second step is classification, easy to remember. Again this will be asked in a 8-mark question. Explain the methodology of risk assessment. So you have to say about how you are going to do the risk assessment process. So first thing, we all know we will collect all type of informations. So like satellite information or the sensors information, this will be collected over a period, not on a single day. Repeatedly they will collect and they will try to, second step is they will classify. Okay, so they will classify the severity of the hazard, probability of occurrence, initialization of exposed risk, then assessment of risk based on probability. So I have already told we use mathematics, so we try to elaborate the condition. So present, with the help of past and present, we will try to tell about future. Then implementation of control measure. Once we identified there is some possibility, see for example if you take into account of like tsunamis, then first you will collect information, then classify the region where it is get more damage, then you will do all type of risk assessment using probabilities like mathematics. Then the step is you have to evacuate the people from there. So that is the implementation of control measure. Then monitoring the risk assessment. Once we ask them to move out, then also we will continuously monitor. Then evaluation and correction. Even if we have done any wrong, we can change. That is, if you have asked them to move to some other place and there is possibility of risk, then we will do evaluation and correction. So this is the methodology. The response and recovery phases, I think this word phases we might have already seen. Okay, then phases of disaster management recovery. So just a repetition, just you have to mention with the year. There we might have told without any year specification. Here I think you all know that in 2005 only act has been passed regarding disaster management. So from that you have to explain, that's all. So unit 3 and unit 4 differences, same content, but you have to tell with respect to India. When you are telling with respect to India, the key thing you have to remember is you are not supposed to tell any year before 2005, because only act based on disaster management itself is proposed in 2005. So as per Disaster Management Act 2005, Disaster management means of continuous and integrated process of planning, organizing and coordinating and implementing measures which are necessary or expected for prevention of danger or threat, then mitigation or reduction of risk, capacity building. See why we are going for disaster management itself, that is the answer. When you want to get out of it, what and all should be done? You have to prevent danger, you have to prevent the risk, you have to go for capacity building, then preparedness to deal with any disaster. If such disaster occur, how you are going to withstand, then prompt response to any threatening disaster situation or disaster, assessing the severity or the magnitude effect of any disaster. Then comes your always rehabilitation and reconstruction. Rehabilitation and reconstruction is moving from that particular place and ask them to settle in a nearby place which is more safe. So disaster management includes administrative decision and operational activities. So various phases are prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, recovery and rehabilitation. Now we can divide this into two groups. One group we call it as pre-disaster risk reduction phases. Another one is called as post-disaster recovery phases. So this 6 we might have already seen in unit number 3 itself. This 6 we are just dividing into two. One is called preparedness, mitigation and prevention is pre-disaster risk reduction phase, before disaster has occurred, and during the disaster we will say it as response, recovery and development. Just we are splitting into two, that's all. Now key phases, there are totally 3 phases. One is pre-disaster, one is during disaster and one is post-disaster. In pre-disaster, before a disaster, to reduce the potential for the human, material and environment loss caused by the hazard. Okay, during disaster is to ensure that needs are provided to the victim are met. Okay, then post disaster, after a disaster, to achieve rapid and durable recovery which does not reproduce the original variability condition. Okay, this is the thing which you have to be very clear, or which is more important. See, spending the money after disaster as to prevent the next time disaster. Okay, so your rehabilitation process or setting up that should be in such a way that if even that disaster occurs next time, that will not affect you. So that how you have to design your post disaster. Okay, so traditionally people think disaster management only in terms of emergency relief. That is not the case. See, only under this condition you are not supposed to say the phases in disaster management, both previous and then post disaster is also there. Okay, so traditionally people think disaster management is only in terms of emergency period and post disaster rehabilitation. Instead, allocated fund before or even to ensure the prevention and preparedness. A successful disaster management planning must encompass the situation that occur before, during or after disaster. So the thing is, whenever you say coming out of disaster is not only putting stress during disaster and post disaster, that is you have to spend the money such that in near future same disaster is not affecting us more. So that is what the main thing. So pre-disaster are nothing but prevention. So reduce the risk of disaster involve activities. So we might have seen when you have some lakes or rivers, what we have told, we have to build up the banks so that water will not come out. So if the water is not coming out, then the nearby people can be safeguarded. So that is what we say it as prevention. So all such things put together will come under this prevention. Mitigation is if something is occurring, the problem faced is less. Okay, so that is called mitigation. Then preparedness, if something is going to occur at the same time, how you are going to respond. Okay, see, in such case at first time you might have not known how to come out of it, but we cannot avoid something. So if that again it is happening, how to come out of it without any problem. So that is called as pre-preparedness. Okay, so early warning system we have seen there, we have taken so many steps that we will give warning that something is going to happen, so that you can come out of it. Then during the disaster phase, so this is the second phase. First phase we have seen, and now we are moving into second phase. So response during disaster, how fast you are able to respond for it. Okay, response, so that this depends upon the previous training. That is what we say, you have to train the people, not only spending the money. It during disaster, the main thing is you have to make the people to respond at a faster rate. Okay, so that comes under this response. Then recovery is used to, all this comes under post. Okay, then third phase, this one is third phase, which we call it as post disaster. So this is the third part. So here recovery is used to describe the activity that encompass the three overlapping phases of emergency relief, rehabilitation and reconstruction. So rehabilitation is moving from that particular temporarily. Okay, rehabilitation includes the provision of temporary public utilities and housing, that is not permanent. So rehabilitation is only temporary, reconstruction is permanent. So reconstruction attempt to return communities to the improved disaster functions. It includes such as replacement of building, infrastructures and lifeline facilities, so that long-term development will take place and it comes out of any issues during disaster. Then development is, it is with a knowledge, so try to come out of, in evolving economy, the development process is an ongoing activity, a long-term preventive bar disaster reduction measure. For example, like construction of embankment against flooding. This is what we have told. Embankment is the sides of the flood or rivers where you try to build. Okay, irrigation facilities as drought proofing measures, increasing plant covers to reduce occurrence of landslides. So in a region where landslide is occurring, try to plant trees such that roots get lock of the soil and landslides will not occur. Okay, land use planning, construction of house capable withstanding of heavy rain, wind speed. So you have to construct like houses such as it should overcome from heavy rain, wind speed and shocks. Okay, of earthquake, or some of the activity that can take up as a part of development plan. Damage assessment methodology. Now we move on to assessment, damage assessment. The primary focus is on condition of physical assessed. Okay, then first one is building. We are going to do your damage assessment for buildings, then road, bridges, then water supply and sanitation, then dams and other irrigation structures, then industry facilities includes power plants, ports and other coastal structure, electrical and communication system structure. So okay, so it may ask in a 16-mark question. So how you are going to do assessment for your disaster management? So when you say as assessment, you have to do for buildings, roads, bridges, water supply, sanitation, dams, other irrigation structures, industrial facilities, ports for ports and other coastal structure, electrical and communication systems. I think in Varda we have seen your total, and this last term, electrical and communication system is totally collapsed. Okay, your towers, electrical structure towers, then communication towers, all that is been uprooted. So you have to do assessment. So how to overcome this? Let us start with the objective of damage assessment. Widely depends on the type and the intensity of the disaster. So it is not common. You cannot say in common assessment damages. So depending upon the disaster, first of all, it will vary. Then the intensity. See, disaster will not be same all the time. See, we have seen so many cyclones, but the Varda is different. Okay, the difference was usually when this cyclones, when they try to cross the land, they will lose the power and they will just give it as a rain. Okay, whereas what this Vardha has done is it has entered and it has even crossed the other part of the peninsula country. So even Kodaikanal is a place where they have not seen cyclone at all, but that Vardha has entered till that Kodaikanal region. Okay, it has uprooted so many trees in Kodaikanal. This has not occurred previously. So that is what we say as intensity. In some case intensity will be less, whereas in some case intensity will be more, and if it is intensity is more, then the damages will be more. So you have to go for assessment properly. Okay, again in damage assessment also we have classification as short term, medium term and long term. Short term is within a few days. So to quickly identify the safe and unsafe buildings, so start your work, you will go and do your study, identify whether that building is safe or not, quickly estimate the total damage losses, quickly identify the status of lifeline of the building and other structure. When you say as medium term, to access safety status of doubtful category structure, where when you see in short term, I will not classify as a doubt and all, I will say it is not worst, it is condition is worst, whereas here we will say doubtful condition, so that we will see whether we will not totally declare it as a building that is not safe. Here we will try to put something and try to make it so that you can come out of it. Then to reason and quantify the damage losses. Then in long term it will be few months to a year to develop rehabilitation, retrofitting procedures to help identify prevalent technical knowledge and implement the mechanism. That comes under long term. Then primary focus on damage assessment. Structures which are owned by multiple agencies of government, then the structure may require government fund for repair and rehabilitation. Then structure that affects large number of people like buildings, bridges, tanks and storage reservoirs. So these structures or these buildings falls under primary focus. See, when you say a building with non-government or is comes under normal public, then getting the amount and doing the work is easy. Whereas when you see government building, then the condition is reverse. So there are so many procedures to be followed. So that should be given first preference, then only it can be solved. So that is what they mean to say. Those structures that may require government fund. So when you require government fund, which means that is government buildings. So government buildings, to repair, the procedure is little bit tedious. You have to get sign from so many person. So that is why that is been brought under primary focus of assessment. Okay. Then secondary focus is structured, owned or operated by specialized agencies. So there you will not have such problems. Very complex structure that requires high level technical skill for assessment. Complex industrial facilities. See, a normal person cannot be taken to a power plant and ask him to assess. He cannot do any assessment and all. See, for example, when you students, you all comes and final year, you can be asked to assess your house for electrical safety. You all know what is the basic require. There should not be any switch which is in broken condition. In that case, that switch has to be replaced. Normal switch, you might have know, 5 amp switch or a 15 amp switch. Then if you are joining, then we know that there should be an insulation tape to join. Okay, all such things are very common for your house. And if you are asked to go and do the same audit work in an industry or in a power plant, then you cannot do. Skill is required. So that is what they say, specialized skill is required for a complex industrial facilities. Port and harbor structure. See, you as normal civil engineer people who construct house cannot be asked to go and do assess in port and all, because where the structure itself is different. Then petrochemical infrastructures, dams, roads, electrical generation and transmission networks, all this requires special skill is required. Then basic philosophy of assessment is should be based on international sound practice. So I am going for assessment. I have a guidelines book, we call it as cookbook, and that book is published by international agency like IEEE, IET and all. So you have to follow that procedure. For I will give one small example. When you have a panel for your, in your house you may have EB board, I think you all know, a small wooden board, 1 meter will be there, one fuse carrier will be there, one changeover switch will be there. Okay, that is normal. If that same for an industry, if you are putting a panel, then from the panel in all three direction the wall should be at least 5 meters away. The reason is, if I go and touch that panel and if I get shocked, I should not go and hit on any wall. Okay, then it will may leads to multiple injury with the electrical, may leads to injury with my head or and when I go and hit that particular wall. So this is all what the standard says. So standard says you put the panel such that you should have a wide space between the panel and the nearby wall. So all this is you can do only if you have a sound knowledge on international practice. Should consider the types of structure prevalent in Gujarat. This is an example just. They should consider the technical skills likely to be available after a disaster. Should incorporate experience from the recent disaster and particularly the 2001 earthquake and 1918 cyclone. See, all this is an example. They say that has occurred, to try to get the knowledge from that. Then damage assessment for building. So now let us move on to for building alone. The method should depends on building type. All buildings are not same. There is difference between the various types of building. See, for example, I will tell you, some building ground floor is parking, 1, 2 you will have structure, whereas in some case from ground itself you will have structures for, or you will have house. In some case underground and all will be there. So depending upon the building, the assessment will vary. Very large number of buildings are likely to be damaged in major disaster. Method should be relatively rapid. Okay, structure repairs and based on technical detail evaluation, method should be technically viable for doing it. The method should consider the variation in international best practice. Okay, so wherever you go for assessment, you should have a sound knowledge. It is like similar to what we call it as energy auditors. So if you say energy auditor, I think you will understand it better. Same way you have person, skilled person for all. Okay, when you say energy auditor, you do audit or you do assessment with respect to energy alone. But here damage assessment is for all. It is like civil, mechanical, electrical, everything is put together. Okay. So damage level is shown here, and slightly damage, moderate damage, extensive damage, then the percentage, then comes your immediate occupancy, damage control, life safety, limited safety, near collapse. See, when damage is more, then assessment report says it is safety is not there. Okay, if it is moderate, they will say life can be safety there. If it is very slight damage, they will say immediate occupancy, you can go and occupy after the disaster has occurred. So this is the level of damage. This is 10, 20, 30, 40 we call it as light, 50, 60, 70 we call it as moderate. When you damage more than 80%, 90% we call intensive damage. So if the damage is more, then depending upon, then you will say the control action. Then they are splitting into grades. So grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 and grade 4. Grade 1 is light, grade 2 is light, then comes moderate, heavy and major, and this color indication is given. Okay, so all this thing the person should know who is going for assessment. When you see anything like light anywhere, then it is understood that it is in the middle of slight damage. When you see heavy, then it should be in order of 80 and 90. He should know. Major is more than, it is a permanent collapse. Okay, and in some case we will mark it with a color like a green tag, yellow tag and red tag. From the color is also you are supposed to identify what is the level. Then proposed procedure for damage assessment of building. International experience clearly shows that a single fit all methodology not feasible to safety all short, medium and long term objectives. That is what I have already told. That is, safety as well as assessment is not common for all types of buildings. Or in other words, I can say I write one set of rules and that rules will not match for all types. So, okay, so you should not say it is there in the book. It is there in the book and that we should follow. That is why they say fit all is not at all possible. Everything will not fit to all. So some codes will be fitting to that particular types of building and some will not be there. 3 steps methodology has been proposed: rapid safety assessment, detailed safety assessment, engineering evaluation. There is, from the word itself it is very clear. When you say rapid safety assessment, by seeing itself we can come to a conclusion: this is worst, this is okay, this is condition where you have to keenly watch. Then detailed safety assessment is taking old records, try to visualize and try to see if the same building was there in previous earthquake also, what was the level, now what is the deterioration it has done. When you say engineering, take paper, pen and do calculations. Okay, so you might have studied so many experiments, put all that experiment in real time and try to see what is the condition. So that we call it as engineering evaluations. So that is what again been explained here. Okay, so let us skip. Then damage assessment for bridge, low redundancy structures. See, this part you try to understand. This is more with civil and less with electrical and nothing with respect to mechanical. Because why I am not saying mechanical, because structures and all is been predefined. Now there is no structure. Only thing is with respect to civil and electrical. The structural repair are based on technical detail evaluation. Method should be technically viable. Damage assessment likely to be carried out by technical person. From the first itself I am saying only technical person should come into picture. So there are government opportunities for you to get into this areas. Okay, so government jobs are there. Only we are not getting in, but there are so many government jobs for assessment. So one who do assessment is called assessmenter. So like it is similar to energy auditing. There are auditors are required for disaster management also. Then damage assessment of roads based on visual evaluation. By seeing the road itself you can tell about the assessment, whether that road is damaged or not, or to what level it is damaged, whether any repair work can be done. So all this thing you can say only if you are a technical person. So that is the second point. Third point is damage assessment procedure developed based on these considerations. So depending upon your visualization and technical knowledge, then you can tell about the procedure to develop. Then storage damage assessment for storage reservoirs. So again we say that you should have a technical knowledge. Then initial damage assessment likely to be carried out. So when you say as reservoirs, what was the condition 10 years back, 15 years back, 20 years back, we have to see, and from there how this has damage has improved, so what should be done. Okay, damage assessment procedure developed based on other consideration also. Then you move on to irrigation structure assessment, mainly based on visual observation only. See, in some assessment by visual observation is plays a major role. Visual observation is nothing but you go and see through your eyes and say what is the condition. Then initial damage assessment likely to be carried out by the owner or the user with the limited technical skills. Damage assessment procedure developed based on their consideration. Then comes your surface pipelines, that is more or less same with the previous case. See, irrigation structure and pipelines which are more or less same, nothing difference, only the word pipeline is there, their irrigation is there, that's all. Then water supply and sewages, that is also same with respect to this. You have to go for visual, then lightly technical person is required, and based upon the technical issues you try to solve. Then comes your ports and harbor. In case of ports and harbor, damage assessment initially based on visual observation. Repairs are based on technical detail evaluation. Initial damage assessment like carried out by the owner or user with a limited technical skill. Then putting into all, you have to go for the entire consideration. Then comes your electrical. Only difference is, till that previous case, skilled person is civil, whereas here the skilled person is an electrical engineer. Okay, so he should know about all technical details regarding electrical issues. Okay, so electrical issues are more risk than civil, then consideration should be properly done with all types of technical knowledges. Then comes your industrial structure, where industrial structure and electrical both are same. Okay, there is no much difference between industrial and electrical, because wherever you say industrial, obviously the key person is only electrical. Civil, there is nothing, only electrical plays more role there. And nowadays everything is automized, so entire role of the industry now is on electrical. Mechanical, there is no see, I think you might have seen automobile industries where mechanical engineers role is not at all there, because nowadays everything is electrical, so electrical engineers plays a major role. So when you go for assessment also, it is like electrical engineers assessment is more required. Then comes your environmental impact. Environmental impact assessment need to be considered for environment and social impact. Assessment need to be carried out over a long term. When you say environment is not polluted on a single day. Even though you say we emit carbon dioxide from the vehicle, see, on the next day you cannot say that carbon dioxide has come to a greater extent and we are unable to breathe. So that condition will not come. Okay, so it may take over a very longer period. And by the by, if you plant trees, automatically the CO2 also will come down. So that is what we say here. So environment impact assessment need to be considered. The environmental and social assessment need to be carried out over a long term. So only here we see this long term, because over a long term only you can see the effect will not be on next day morning. So with this we will wind up today's class. So that is with respect to unit number 4. So with this, unit number 4 is